Live and on tape from the Silicon Valley, it's the only show that actually really enjoys riding a roller coaster with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. It is the House of Takes late night show, a big show for you on a Monday night. We are recording just in front of 9:30 PST on a Monday night. As I mentioned, a big night in sports as the Michigan Wolverines are your national college football champions. We'll talk a little bit about Jim Harbaugh and what that actually might mean for a wide variety of teams in the National Football League. Speaking of the National Football League, it was Black Monday. We will cover that, plus a segment for you on Draymond Green. Now, I kidded Adam Silver the other day for his 12-game suspension, the indefinite suspension. I was like, how could that only be 12 games for one Draymond Green? But we've got some Draymond Green video worth actually checking out. I've got all of that. And of course, trust me, a whole lot more coming up on the big show today.
You're listening to the House of Takes NBA show with Dave Daba, the only NBA show in North America that believes the Rudy Gobert trade worked out for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Presented by Stealth.ltd.
Seriously, I mean, that trade did work out for the Minnesota Timberwolves, at least so far. And even if the Timberwolves lose in their first round of the playoffs, it will still be an improvement over what the Timberwolves used to be. All right. Big show, as I mentioned, just about an hour ago. Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines pulled off a 15-0 record for this season, despite the fact that Jim actually didn't coach in 6 of the games. A dominant performance, basically, by the Michigan Wolverines, who, quite frankly, even though things were still a little tight entering the fourth quarter, I felt as if the Michigan Wolverines had that game entirely in hand. Now, earlier in the day in the National Football League, it was Black Monday. And Black Monday sort of turned and fizzled a little bit. The guy that made the trade for Blake Bortles is gone in Carolina, which wasn't terribly surprising. Wink Martindale reportedly stepped down as the defensive coordinator of the G-Men. Not terribly surprising either. Ron Rivera out as the head coach with the Washington Commanders. A little bit more on that in a second. And then Arthur Smith out as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, largely for his malpractice in not using Bijan Robinson appropriately throughout the entire season. I pretty much guarantee that Arthur Smith would still have a gig today if he actually used Bijan Robinson significantly more than he did. You know, making the decision to try to rely on a second or third string quarterback who's actually your starting quarterback and using his arm instead of really building in a strong running game attack was ultimately Arthur Smith's downfall. As for Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron, as we all like to call him, with the Washington Commanders, look, this was never going to be an easy gig for Ron Rivera. And it certainly proved to be true at the end of the day. Rivera did the best possible job he could do, considering the hand that he was dealt with the whole Daniel Schneider fiasco. Now that Josh Harris and Magic Johnson and a variety of other owners have taken over the Commanders, the best thing I can say, at least to this point, about the new organization is they understand how to put a organization together. Josh Harris understands that he cannot be making the player personnel calls. Jimmy Johnson, or Jimmy Jones, so he understands that. But what did the Washington Commanders do earlier in the day? So after they let Riverboat Ron go, they went ahead and brought in Bob Myers, the former general manager and president, I should say, of the Golden State Warriors. Myers, before he took over the Golden State Warriors, was a sports agent. Myers understands how the sports world works. Now, for those of you that are going to make jokes about basketball versus football and how they're two completely different things, Josh Harris addressed that earlier in the day and said that he was basically looking to Bob Myers for advice. Of course, Bob wouldn't be involved in the, and I quote, X's and O's, which isn't terribly surprising. Do I think bringing in Bob Myers as an advisor is a good thing for Josh Harris and the Washington Commanders organization that desperately needs to change that name? And the answer to that question is absolutely yes. You in business, like in sports, want to surround yourself with people that have both high energy and have proven that they can win. Bob Myers has absolutely done that throughout his career. In terms of the X's and O's, they also went out and brought in Rick Spielman, the former Minnesota Viking general manager, as well as, Spielman will also be an advisor and certainly will be a bigger part of the coaching hires and the hire for the new president or general manager of the Washington Commanders, whatever title that particular person also gets. Look, I think the Washington Commanders are in good hands in terms of ownership. Certainly, this organization is in far better hands than it was before. All right. So in terms of the National Football League, and we'll get into the Draymond Green story here in just a second, but in terms of the National Football League, now that Jim Harbaugh has won his title at Michigan, it's sort of like LeBron going back to Cleveland. And then after he won his title in Cleveland, he felt like he was free to move above the country, which is a line from Southwest Airlines. And I think Jim Harbaugh probably sort of feels the same way. I mean, why would Jim Harbaugh actually stay in college and continue to deal with the NCAA? Yeah, the NCAA is like a bunch of old men that used to be in Scooby-Doo and used to say stuff like, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those darn kids. That's like the board of governors who runs the NCAA. They're all out there basically trying to do the same thing. The NCAA at this point has lost most of its authority, compliments to Cartman, and quite frankly, at some point is going to be turned into something that, quite frankly, a lot of people don't really pay much more attention to. I mean, how else can you explain the fact that Jim Harbaugh missed 6 games as the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines, went on to coach in the playoffs, and went on to win a national championship? Like, for God's sakes, NCAA, if any of it was so bad, then why would you allow Jim Harbaugh to coach in the actual playoffs? The crime at hand is minimal at best. I've often said that in sports, there's very little morals. Now, I don't mean that there's not morals off the field, but I mean on the field during a game. There is very little morals in sports. How else can you explain a quarterback that clearly knows that the wide receiver didn't catch the ball and the coach encourages him to run up and call a play before the other team can challenge it? ultimately morals in sports on the field is different than morals in sports off the field. Did Jim Harbaugh know what was happening or not happening with the practice videotaping? Look, I don't know. Did Jim Harbaugh somewhere along the way make some recruiting mistakes that go against the NCAA rules and regulations? I got to tell you, I don't know, but I'm willing to bet every coach, just about 95% of the coaches in the NCAA, have bent the rules over the years because the rules are outdated and antiquated. And that's why I don't really put an asterisk in any way next to what Jim Harbaugh did with this Michigan Wolverines team. So that turns our attention to the National Football League. What should Jim Harbaugh do next? Should Jim Harbaugh go ahead back to the University of Michigan and bake some more money out of the university? Basically get some of the money back that he gave away in the first place? Or should Jim Harbaugh go ahead and take that leap back into pro football? There are several franchises in the National Football League that would be wise to actually have Jim Harbaugh on their speed dial come at 10 p.m. tonight. As soon as Jim Harbaugh is done with all his press conferences and all his obligations, if I were a owner of a National Football League team and or a GM of a National Football League team that was seriously interested in bringing Jim Harbaugh to that particular organization, I would get going sooner than later. Look, don't wait for Tuesday morning, Dean Spanos Jr. Get on the phone now and make a call to Jim Harbaugh. Now, if I'm Josh Harris and Magic Johnson and Bob Myers and Rick Spielman and the rest of the new brain trust of the Washington Commanders, I'm absolutely, at the very least, getting a text message in to Mr. Harbaugh tonight to congratulate him on his championship. Jim Harbaugh has proven, regardless of where he goes as a head coach, National Football League, college football, that he's a winner. Sure, he hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, but he really hasn't been given a chance over a long period of time with a ownership group that was ultimately patient enough with Jim Harbaugh. The two teams I mentioned certainly would be willing to take a leap of faith and hire Jim Harbaugh sight unseen. Even Josh Harris and the Washington Commanders probably would be willing to work out a deal before Harbaugh even made his way to the Beltway. All right. And finally tonight, actually some breaking news on Ja Morant, who is injured during practice on, let me read this here. Morant is having season-ending shoulder surgery. He was injured in practice on Saturday. So that is a huge blow for the Memphis Grizzlies. And we could probably at this point pronounce the Memphis Grizzlies season over. They had a shot at least working their way back into contention. What it will take now for the Memphis Grizzlies to continue down that path is pretty simple, and that is Marcus Smart has to score 25 to 30 points a night, get 5 or 6 rebounds, and have 5 assists. That's what it's going to take for this Memphis Grizzly team to get back into playoff contention this year. And I just don't know if Marcus Smart has enough left in the tank. This looks like a washed year for this Memphis Grizzly team. Sorry to see Ja go down because he was playing so well in his comeback. All right. And finally, tonight on the House of Takes late night show, I love saying that. We've got a couple videos. I have some comments in between the videos on Draymond Green. Let's start out with the Adam Silver video.
It's too much for me. Like, conversation with Adam Silver, commissioner of our league. I just told him, Adam, it's too much for me. Like, this is too much. It's all becoming too much for me. And I'm going to retire. And Adam said, you're making a very rash decision. And I won't let you do that. You know, we had a long, great conversation, very helpful to me. Very thankful to play in a league with a commissioner like Adam, who's more about helping you than hurting you, or helping you than punishing you, or, you know, he's more about the players.
All right. So that was a bite from the Draymond Green podcast, as you saw there. And my thoughts on Adam Silver and what Draymond Green said are pretty simple. Now, prior to Adam Silver taking over the National Basketball Association, the NBA was in a different spot when it came to player relations. At that point, players were still sort of, if you will, out of control. And the punishments that had to be placed on those players that got out of control off the court, as well as on the court, were certainly thrown down, if you will, with an iron fist. Now, when Adam Silver took over as the commissioner of the NBA, it was clear that he was going to have a softer approach. I mean, you have to remember, this is a different generation of players. This is a generation of players that, probably all have at least 100 participation trophies sitting in their trophy rooms. I'm just saying that the Gen Z and millennials out there are of a different breed than the prior generations that had played and graced the floors of the National Basketball Association. Adam Silver, being the smart man that he is, adjusted his stance and adjusted how he deals with players and player relations. I think if we were able to get other players who have been in similar situations to Draymond Green, meaning being suspended for a significant period of time, they would probably say something similar about Adam Silver as well. Because Adam Silver is what we're all about, right? Making money. But Adam Silver, I think, actually cares about the people that make him money. And when you care about the people that make you money, then you have the opportunity, even though there's a line between the league and the players union, you still have an opportunity to actually get along and get the most out of those people. It's the same thing in business. Now, the other day, there was a signing bonus that a certain Kansas City Chiefs defensive end had the opportunity to make. Now, the team could have forced him to sit down and not allowed him to try to go get that sack that was going to net him over, I think it was like $1.25 million in his bonus for the year. But they let him play. They originally were going to only let this particular person play, and I think you know who I'm talking about. We're only going to let him play in the first series of downs. Give him 3 downs to go get a sack. That was what Andy Reid had originally planned. Andy Reid, though, being the coach that he is, understanding the players on his team, understanding what momentum means to a organization, not just off the field, but on the field as well. He allowed him to play into the second half of the game where he got his sack, got his bonus, and then rightfully took a seat on the bench for the rest of the day. Adam Silver, like Andy Reid, right? Andy Reid's not a spring chicken. understands the importance of player relations. It's not what it used to be in the National Football League, and it's not what it used to be in the NBA from a coach's player relationship. So the NBA executives apparently understand this as well. So well done to Adam Silver on that. Now, a little bit more. Now, apparently Steph Curry checked in with Draymond Green every other day or every day. Draymond talks a lot about that during his most recent podcast as well. One more snippet from the Draymond Green show for you.
So on that day, Coach Kerr came to visit me after shoot-around. And we sat in the yard. He cried. I cried. Because there's a bond there that I've seen it all. I've seen the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. And he just said to me, I want you to end this the right way.
All right. So there you go. And it's interesting because during the Adam Silver part of the video, Draymond talks about retirement. And then when Steve Kerr comes by and they cry and do all of that emotional stuff, it seems as if, retirement was definitely on the mind of Steve Kerr, understanding that about his player, Draymond Green. Now, is the NBA better with a Draymond Green on the court? And the answer is, even as Draymond ages, the answer is absolutely yes. Do I think Draymond Green's going to get a couple technicals and get booted out of a basketball game at some point in the next 6 months? What's the over-under on that? I would take whatever the over-under is. I'd take the under. It's going to happen where Draymond Green mouths off too much and then ultimately gets kicked out of a basketball game. That will happen. Now, the question is, will there be another incident where Draymond Green actually hurts somebody on purpose? Because that's really what we're talking about, Draymond Green. We are not telling you to not play with passion. We're just telling you to not hurt other players with that passion. So you're going to have to figure out how to get that under control. And I think that's the thing that Draymond Green is most worried about. I think Draymond probably doesn't know, even despite the 12-game suspension and whatever kind of help he's been getting, whether or not that's going to work when he actually gets into live fire incidences. So only time will tell on that, regardless of whether or not there's another incident and he gets suspended again. I think it's safe to say he'll absolutely get himself kicked out of a game at some point during the next 6 months. All right. That is it for tonight's House of Takes late night show. Thank you so much, North America, for tuning in. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe to the Big House of Takes channel yet, please go ahead and do so. And of course, like this video. For the House of Takes late night show, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
You've been listening to the House of Takes NBA show with Dave Daba, presented by Stealth.ltd.